Hey, Steve.
Hey, Shervin, how's it going?
Good.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us this morning. We thought we might take this opportunity to show you some animals that aren't on display right now due to our social distancing guidelines. And also want to let you know that there's a link that you can follow afterwards to get some more educational opportunities. And any support that you're willing to give us, we're more than happy to also take on that link. So, my name's Steve. I'm one of the animal keepers here at the zoo, and I work primarily with reptiles and amphibians. And we just thought we'd start in and introduce some of our lizards and talk about some of the adaptations that these guys have. So this is Pop. Pop is a panther chameleon. They're native to Madagascar, and a lot of you may be familiar with chameleons. Rango from the Disney movie. You can see that he's very well adapted to climbing up on branches. You can see his feet. They're specially designed to grab onto stuff, and fingers. And what's really cool is this tail. So a lot of folks, kind of think of lizards as, oh, their tails come off and they grow back. Well, that's only true in some. These guys, for instance, they're very dependent on their tail. Chameleons don't, if their tail was to come off or be bit off by a predator, it won't grow back. And they really depend on this tail. This tail, not only does it help them climb, you can see he's grabbing on my thumb, but one of the other more important aspects of this tail is that they have to use it as an anchor. So if you're familiar with the chameleon, you know that they shoot their tongue out really hard to go after prey. And that tongue will come out so fast that if they don't have a good anchor, it'll pull them right off a branch. So very pretty cool adaptation for that. He wants to. And the other thing about chameleons is they want to go wherever it's high. So you can see that he's wanting to climb. I'm going to go ahead and move him down here.
So, Steve, for the folks that missed it, can you tell us again what kind of chameleon is this?
He's a panther chameleon from Madagascar.
And so, how many species of chameleons are there? Some people, they've seen maybe an anole and have heard about that as a chameleon. What's the difference? Right.
So an anole's not actually a true chameleon. Anoles can change colors, but their color range is limited to brown to green. You can see that he's way more adaptable to colors. Pop here will go everywhere from a burgundy to a bright red with blue bars. You can see he's got some real light blue on his side right now. He's got his head will turn almost completely blue if he wants it to. And his mouth is yellow. He likes to show that off too. He's getting a little grouchy.
So Terry's asking, will he bite?
So Terry, that's a good question, right? And will he bite? Yeah, usually not. Can he bite? Yes, definitely. And they've got pretty strong jaws, so I'm careful. But this particular species is not real prone to bite unless they're really being agitated and really need to get away.
So I'm sorry for the folks. We're having a little bit of audio trouble with the mic coming in and out, but I think it'll get better here. So tell us, how big can Pop get here? Is he full size now? Or?
Pop is pretty much full grown. Chameleons and most lizards and most other reptiles continue to grow throughout their whole life. So, and he's what we call an adult. These guys, they have a lifespan of somewhere about between 5 and 7 years, so they're not a particularly long-lived animal. They mature really quickly. So they become an adult in about 12 to 18 months, and then they're ready to be adult lizards.
Aaron's asking, how many bugs will he eat in a day?
Aaron, he would probably eat as many bugs as I would give him, and he would just become more and more overweight. So we really kind of give him a limited amount. His diet is typically 6 to 8 crickets every couple of days. So if you think about about a 3/4 inch long cricket, but he will certainly eat more than that if we were to allow him to.
So are all chameleons carnivorous?
Yes. So all chameleons are carnivorous primarily. There are a couple of species which will occasionally eat leaves. Some from the desert that will use those leaves as a source of moisture if they aren't getting enough dew in the morning. But they're primarily carnivorous.
We have a question here from Sabrina. She's wondering if a chameleon like this would make a good pet?
Sabrina, chameleons in general don't make good pets. You know, as much as Pop tolerates being handled, he doesn't really like it. You'll see that he just wants to kind of sit and be left alone. We usually, lizards in general don't make great pets. You do want to be really careful about where they're coming from if you do decide to get one. And you really need to take in consideration that there's a lot of setup and a lot of detail to keeping a lizard as a pet. I kind of equate it to folks who have aquariums or even like saltwater aquariums. It's really, there's so much setup, and the animals themselves really aren't for handling. It's more to if you enjoy looking at them, that's kind of the other thing.
Janet's asking, why do their eyes bulge out?
Janet, so those eyes aren't really bulged out per se. They're just they're set like that on the outside of their skull so they can see. If you look, in fact, he's doing a good job right now. If you're able to see both of his eyes at one time, you can see that he can aim each eye in different directions simultaneously. And the iris of his eye is out there at the end of that, what we call turret, so that he can really focus. And then when he finds something that he wants to hunt, he'll aim both his eyes at the same direction. It gives him a really, really great sense of depth. And so it makes it so firing that tongue is very, very accurate.
Piper's asking, how can he do that with his eyes? How can they move two different directions at the same time?
Piper, I don't know. I wish I could do it. I think that'd be a great trick to be able to do. Just one of the adaptations that these guys have to be able to be successful hunters.
Summer wants to know, how old is Pop?
Summer Pop is, he's about 18 months old now.
And Terry's asking, does he always have to eat live foods?
Yeah, Terry, that's a good question. Technically, no. You could, if we wanted to feed him a deceased prey animal, we could. But usually it's the motion of the animal, of his prey, that really kind of stimulates him to want to eat. So we always give him live food.
Michelle's asking, what are the largest chameleons?
Michelle, the largest species of chameleons, there's what's called a Wistoletti's chameleon, which is also native to Madagascar, which can reach a body length of about 24 inches. So you can imagine his is not even 12 inches. They're much larger. And then there's an African mainland species that's called the Meller's chameleon, which are also very big, but not as big as the Wistoletti's.
So we have a couple other lizards to look at here. Who do we have?
do, yeah. So let's see. So we talked about tails in this guy, right? You'll see a nice prehensile tail. All right, well, let's shift gears.
While you're doing that, Tresia is asking, what is Pop's lifespan?
Pop's lifespan is about 5 to 7 years. So this is Hank. Hank is our African fat-tailed gecko. You want to guess how we got his name? So fat-tailed geckos are not your typical gecko that most people think of, running around on the walls, stuck upside down on glass. Fat-tailed geckos don't have the little sticky adhesive lamellae, we call them, on their feet. They have claws. So he can't climb up anything, other than, anything a typical lizard. He can't climb vertical surfaces. But his tail adaptation is this nice, fat, juicy tail. And that tail, that's where he stores surplus food. So when he's got lots of food to eat, he'll store that just like we would as fat. But when he comes to times when he can't, when a lot of food's not available, he'll be able to use that tail to kind of absorb nutrients from there. And that tail will shrink way down, and it can swell back up when he's in good times. So he's lots of opportunity to stay healthy.
Sarah says he looks like a leopard gecko. Are they closely related?
Sarah, they're both out of the same family of geckos. That's really smart. These guys are African. They're more, they live where it's more humid, and leopard geckos are more Asian, North Asian. But yes, they are. They're both what we call eyelid geckos. So both those species of geckos have actual eyelids, whereas most geckos don't have any eyelids.
Debbie's asking, what are their mating habits?
Secretive, Debbie. They, they're nocturnal, so we don't see that very often. They have a courtship behavior, whereas a male, he does a lot of tail He'll do a lot of tail wiggling. The female will do tail wiggling. She'll raise her tail to allow him to mate, and then she'll lay a couple of eggs. He'll go away. She'll lay a couple of eggs, and in about 60 days, those eggs will hatch, and you got 2 little baby fat-tailed geckos.
And Benjamin had a question about Pop. Actually, he said, can he actually move fast if he wants to?
Fast is kind of a subjective term, right? He certainly can't move fast enough where I couldn't catch him. But he can move surprisingly fast. If he gets up and goes, he can move.
So tell us a little bit about what's the difference between this gecko and some that you might see climbing on the walls in Hawaii or Florida.
So the typical gecko that people think of, instead of I don't know if this will show that you can see, he's got just regular toes with little claws at the end of those toes, whereas a typical gecko will have a big big flat toe pads that will allow it to stick onto things. So these guys just don't have that. They're considered a little bit more primitive species of geckos, so they haven't evolved those things. These guys live on the ground. Most geckos are arboreal. They live in the trees.
Kaylee's asking, what's the lifespan for this species?
Kaylee, these guys are probably very long-lived, between 15 and 20 years. We know leopard geckos, for instance, that can live to be about 25. So we anticipate that these guys are probably pretty similar as far as the lifespan.
And Maggie might have missed this. Where is the species native to?
Maggie, these guys are native to Africa.
All right. So we've seen 2 very different tails here.
Yeah.
So can you, just to rehash here, tell us what's the difference between what this gecko uses its tail for and what Pop uses his tail for?
Yeah, so Pop uses his tail for grabbing. Right? If you kind of look down here, you can see he's got himself secure on that branch. So whether it's shooting after his food and it acting as an anchor or just simply holding him in place, he's got that. The fat-tailed gecko uses that tail as storage for surplus food. Right? So if he's in a time where he's getting plenty to eat and he can eat all he wants, he can store that for times when there's not as much. Think of it as his mobile pantry.
And we have one more really interesting tail.
Yeah, this one's probably the most amazing. Well, it's a pretty amazing tail anyway. So this is a Taylor's shield-tailed lizard. And you can see they're very small. He's an adult. This is Lawrence, our Taylor shield-tailed lizard. You guys are football fans out there. And you can see his tail is actually this portion right here. And that tail is very spiky, right? So what he'll do, and you can see right now, is he's kind of gulping air, so he's inflating himself. You can see he's getting kind of rounded. These guys, when they're threatened by a predator, they'll dive into their hole, and they'll just leave this exposed to cover the hole. And so anything that's trying to get to him has got to figure out a way to get past those spines.
Amazing. So is he full size? Right?
Yeah, he's full grown. He's he's about 5 years old now. When they're born, they're only about the size of my thumbnail. So they're very small. They're very cute.
One of my favorites. Where do shield-tailed agamas come from?
Shield-tailed from northeastern Africa. So
we actually have another question because there's a little lag here.
Yeah,
Storm was asking, how do chameleons get along with each other?
Chameleons are primarily solitary, so they don't get along with each other very well, except when it's time for breeding season, and then only for a short period of time. The neat thing about their colors is their colors are how they talk to each other. So when he's looking for a female, he'll have a certain color, and if a receptive female sees him, she'll actually change to a particular color, and then they'll know that, okay, it's okay to approach each other. If they don't get those colors, then they know to stay away from each other. And males will use those colors to flash at each other and keep their distance from each other unless they want to Sometimes they will actually physically fight if they get close enough, but usually just flashing those colors is a good warning for them.
And Heather has a second grader who wanted to know how long can a fat-tailed gecko get?
So Heather, that fat-tailed gecko, he's about as long as they get. This is pretty much full grown. Like I said, they'll continue to grow slowly as they get older, but not much longer than that.
And okay, so we're back with the agama now. Jen, who missed this, wants to know what's his name?
His name's Lawrence. Lawrence Taylor Shield-tailed agama. Sometimes we really stretch to find names for these guys.
Scott is asking, how do you know if it's a girl or a boy?
Well, let's see if I can show you. It's pretty easy. If you look on the bottom, so if you look, can you guys see that yellow? There's like a yellow, they're very hard to see, and without my glasses I can barely see it, but that's a row of what we call femoral pores. Those are actually postanal femoral pores, and they secrete a waxy substance, and only males really secrete the waxy substance. Does that show up?
Yes. And Kelly's asking, what does this species eat?
These guys are omnivores, so they love bugs to the point where it can be unhealthy for them. So they eat primarily vegetables with occasional bugs.
So, Steve, as we've been looking at these lizards, people love lizards. We're getting a lot of questions about pet lizards. What sort of advice can you give in general if somebody is considering getting a lizard? What sort of research and what sort of big considerations they need to?
I guess if you're considering a pet lizard and you're kind of set on it, there's available a lot of husbandry materials out there. Be careful where you get those sources. Your local exotic vets will usually have real good sources for husbandry type of things. The animals themselves, you really want to make sure that they're captive bred. And that doesn't mean, there's some misnomers. There's what we call farm bred animals, which are basically just kind of collected in the wild and then, brought to the United States. You want to avoid that kind of thing. Really, if you can at all possible, buy captive bred animals. Be really particular about, which animals you're buying. It's all of us have gone into a pet shop before and seen, a sad-looking animal, be it a lizard or other reptile or other animal, and thought, oh, I'll take it home and make it better. That's, it's really not the right thing to do. You make sure you're picking out a healthy animal. Get advice from your, veterinarian.
So longevity is another big consideration.
Yeah, and that's it, right? You really need to think about some of these animals, like Pop, he has a natural lifespan of between 5 and 7 years. So, we need to expect that. Whereas, the fat-tailed gecko, 25 years. So, you kind of need to know, are you buying an adult animal that maybe isn't, you don't know how old it is already? Like I said, really invest a lot of time in research on what particular species you want first.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Steve. I guess one last question is, how can people help lizards survive?
The best way to help them survive is protect the environment, right? Lizards as a whole are doing pretty well. Most of them are pretty adaptable. There's a few species that are really in trouble, but the biggest thing you can do is recycle. Really think about where your wood products are coming from. We all hear about palm oil and we know about orangutans, but the other thing is there's a lot of reptiles and stuff that live in those forests too. So really think about your effect on the environments, and especially for lizards in particular, the tropical environments. We don't have lots of lizards that live outside of tropical environments, but the ones that do could, obviously use some thinking about.
Well, Steve, thanks so much for hanging out with us and the lizards today.
Yeah, for sure. You guys, hopefully everybody learned something. Click on that link, learn more. There's way more than just these 3 out there in the world. So.
Awesome. All right, we'll see you lizards later. Thanks for watching, everybody.